Welcome to Materia Collective, the VGM scene, and you. I've got my game show voice on.
Nice.
Y'all having a good MAGFest so far? I'm a bit tired. I'm an old man, but you know, I gotta power through and stuff. So, what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about Materia Collective and who we are, what we do, and give you a clear idea of what role Materia plays in the VGM community. Today we're going to discuss how you can get involved with Materia Collective and what form that may take. Sounds very formal, doesn't it? So a few things Materia can do for you. Materia can help publish solo VGM albums for you.
VGL is video game lore.
Video gaming lore.
Or video game Lauren.
You can also join Materia's community as a collaborator and take part on our large community albums that we release throughout the year. You can join as a performer, a singer, a mixing engineer, or a variety of capacities. You can also get involved by arranging your own track and, you know, make your dream arrangement of one of your favorite video game tracks. Like you can make an opera sonic track, or like, give us an example, Doug, of some crazy track.
How about a deathcore neo-funk Final Fantasy VI rendition of Kafka's theme, perhaps?
Yes, very much yes. Materia obviously can potentially advise you on the release of your Materia Collective or your solo release album. You also may just want to be involved as an awesome fan and just listen to our music. How many of you have heard of Materia Collective before? Cool. How many of you have heard some of our albums, where it be solo releases or community? Cool. Well, you'll know a little bit about us at least. Anyways, that's a quick overview. I suppose what it boils down to is, what do you want out of the world of game music? So, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what Materia is and the VGM community, we'll start by introducing our panelists, who are a mix of the leadership team for Materia Collective and also members of the team who have either released solo albums or performed as arrangers. So, starting with Diwa, do you want to introduce yourself? Okay. Maybe mention your favorite game and when you joined Materia Collective.
Okay. Hello, my name is Diwa, also known as String Player Gamer from YouTube. I do video game music covers with my electric violin. I've been in Materia since day one, since we released the first Final Fantasy VII remixed album. I've also released my own solo albums in Materia, like a Pluckhead, a Cuphead cover album, Undertale, Strings of Determination, a 46-strong cover album for Undertale, and my latest project, which is Lullabies of Video Game Music, a series of albums called Video Game Music Box.
Hi, my name is Doug Perry. Hi.
Hi, Doug.
Yeah, I too have been in Materia Collective since day one. My role is to serve in the leadership team as kind of the guy who keeps an eye on the community in general. So I'm there keeping tabs on the Facebook group, deleting people's posts when they're not appropriate, and managing our Discord as well, which y'all should join if you're all Discord types.
Hi everyone, my name is Sebastian Wolf.
Who are you,
He's the guy in charge.
Who is Sebastian?
I founded Materia Collective about 3.5 years ago, sort of by accident. When during E3, when Final Fantasy VII Remake or the remaster was announced, I made a Facebook post and asked, hey, maybe someone is interested in collaborating on a Final Fantasy VII remix album because it's one of the best soundtracks. So a few people were interested, and a couple of months later, we ended up with 192 people for a very short 87-track EP. of Final Fantasy VII, and we called it Materia. And that's
Small
where
EP.
The name was born. We released it. It was reviewed really well. It was a lot of fun to make new friends, collaborate. And then we released it. It was out, and everyone sat around. Okay, what's next? So we kept doing it. It's been amazing to watch the community grow for the last 3 years. Thanks to the leadership and executive producers and collaborators, I've been able to sort of take a step back and focus on more, the adulthood side of, I suppose, the community. I do the accounting, the spreadsheets, the metadata, the business logistics, the keeping the lights on thing. And it's really rewarding to see sort of what can come about when you collaborate. I don't have a current favorite game, but I think Horizon Zero Dawn's probably pretty high up there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Leibowitz, also known as Lauren the Flute. I have been with Materia since that Facebook post, which was exciting just because I'd never done the level of arrangement or the style of arrangement Materia does before, so that was really exciting. So what I do, my day job, I'm a marketing copywriter. My whole background is in marketing and branding. So I mean, if Sebastian does some of the stuff that nobody wants to do, I do some of the other stuff that nobody else wants to do, which sometimes involves breaking people's hearts and being like, okay, we need to rethink how we can make this more marketable, and telling people, yes, I know you're precious, beautiful, artistic baby, but it's a product that we have to sell, because all of our covers are 100% licensed, which does mean that we charge for the albums, and that's why it both supports the original composers, it supports the artists who work on the album, and it lets us keep doing cool and exciting new things. But yeah, so I both look at our albums before they come out, and kind of gauge how marketable I think they are, and maybe give input on ways we might make it more marketable. And then once we are working on a community album, it's my job to sit down with the album producers and go over a marketing plan of how we're going to get the word out. So that's me.
I'm Emmanuel Lagumbai. I work in metadata for Materia Collective. Oh, I guess I started with Materia with the first album as well. My first ever arrangement of something was a barbershop quartet version of the Final Fantasy VII Chocobo theme. That was fun. And going back to the metadata, I basically am there to make sure that the right people are being credited, the right people are being paid royalties, the right people are being paid, just by taking the information and from putting it from one spreadsheet into like the distribution side of things. So just making sure that the right names are being seen on storefronts, they're spelled correctly, hopefully, or if they're corrected if they are not, and that kind of stuff.
Hello, I'm Stephen Frober. I've been with Materia Collective also along the same timeline as these people, and I am something of a producer, community manager, honesty check kind of person, I guess. And so I've had the privilege of kind of putting my name as producer on albums where other people make awesome tracks, and it's been good. So like Sonic the Hedgehog, Final Fantasy Tactics, and a new one that shall be out soon.
Currently unannounced.
Currently unannounced, and that's why I'm not saying anything else. What else? I like music, I guess, and I like these people, so I like you guys. Cool.
Actually, can I ask how many of you guys are in Materia Collective right now?
I didn't want to ask that question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm nosy. I'm sorry, Brian.
It's okay.
Okay. I was going to ask how many of you guys are interested in maybe joining Materia Collective. Yay!
Cool.
Friends!
Welcome.
A tiny little bit about me as well. My name's Brian Diamond. I've been an arranger, a collaborator, and producer on Materia Collective albums. I produced Zodiac with Stephen Frober about a year and a half ago now, I think. Final Fantasy Tactics remix album. And also I've been part of the production of the Unannounced project as well. What else? I didn't join Materia at the beginning. I joined in the second album because I'd learned about the Materia album and how awesome it was, and Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game. And I was like, oh god, this is terrible. I couldn't join that album. This is the most awesome album I've ever heard. But anyways, that's enough about me. Most of these guys are going to be doing the talking. So, Sebastian, you already gave a kind of the origin story of Materia Collective a little bit. How do you see it as being different as, I suppose, an album management or a a collective management from the beginning to now? Like, how much has it changed, or has it changed?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. It's been such an inspiring process to sort of see how the community has both changed and evolved organically over the last 3-4 years, three and a half, 4 time.
Just over 3, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've released around 100 albums last year. Right? It feels like that.
Ridiculous.
We have about 1,200 different payees that are part of Materia Collective. Creators, album producers, track producers, collaborators, labels that we now help manage. So it's been really fascinating to sort of see how it's grown and sort of the ways that we can grow and also shape the evolution of Materia Collective. I think the biggest change recently is, as we're working on shared causes and shared sort of inspirations, it's nice to find sort of our niche. We're standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of other video game music communities that have been around for decades in some cases. So I think for Materia Collective, sort of our goal, or one of the goals, is to bridge the creator and the fan communities, and sort of make more opportunities happen through, aforementioned metadata and spreadsheets and licensing things.
All that exciting stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, I know
it's my favorite.
Somebody has to.
No,
He's serious. He loves spreadsheets.
In all seriousness, yes, spreadsheets are the best, and I think through they're my favorite. Through like management stuff like that, we can really create so much more cool things. Last year we released our second volume of an Undertale piano sheet music book. The whole reason I'm involved in video game music at all is sitting down at the piano as a kid and trying to figure out melodies. There was no sheet music available, so I think the amount of opportunities that we can now create as we're evolving, as we're growing, can really benefit not only our current community but the community that is to come, and I think that's really special.
Cool. That's an excellent answer. You're obviously a practiced public speaker.
I ramble.
You've done a few. Next up, Stephen. How do you feel community albums have changed since day one? I suppose from a production point of view, because you've probably, I'm not sure, as regards community albums, you probably produced the most, maybe,
I think
or at least equal to the most.
Yeah, I think Emily is maybe the other one that's catching up and is just as crazy. So production. When we first got started, I was one of the people on his original post that was kind of like, hey, haha, Final Fantasy VII, let's make some music. And I think I was like, hell yes. And so then we started. And so the first Final Fantasy album that we did, Materia, was like a whirlwind of passion and sweat. And discovering new friendships, and just all of these people just going, we love each other and let's make music. And it was cool, and it was very exciting, and it was really organic. And so then what happened after that was, as any community develops, you have just kind of the storming phase, right, where you've gotten past the initial, the initial development phase, and then you have to start learning how to organize it and how to make it function long-term and keep it going. So we've had a lot of hard work from a couple of really key people. Again, I mentioned Emily already. She does a lot of good stuff, as well as everybody you see up here for behind-the-scenes community management type stuff, so that each album can be something of an organized, good experience for people. So as we've gotten farther along, we've gotten on a set schedule, and tried to be more open and transparent with people about what's coming, and giving people opportunities to participate. And specifically, we've had pushes towards making sure that new people, for those of you who are interested in joining, can come into the community and not experience too much. Like, it's inevitable that when a community develops, the people that were there at the beginning are going to have something of a closer relationship just because they were there at the beginning. But one thing that we've really made an effort in doing is making sure that when new people come into Materia Collective, you're not just walking into like a clique and you don't have a place or anything. Like, we really have regular intervals where people can come in and decide how you want to participate and meet people and have chances to be involved. And that takes effort on everybody's part to kind of explicitly welcome people and make sure that they can participate. But that, I would say, has been probably one of the biggest changes that's a positive since we've gotten started, is that, you know, it's not as cowboy and organic and, you know, sort of raw fun as it used to be. However, many more people are now participating and have a chance to be a part of it in whatever way they feel. And so I think that's been a really cool point of growth for us.
Cool, because you started off with how many members, would you say, Sebastian? Roughly.
A little under 200, probably.
Little under 200. As far as I know, it's 660 at the moment, at least in the main Materia group. There'll be a lot of collaborators outside the group that haven't come in yet, that people from Materia have invited to perform on albums. So we're at least 660. So this is an incredible amount of people from all over the world, not just across America. We've got people in Asia, we've got people in Europe. I'm from the UK myself, so I've come over here and I've met lots of friends through Materia, and I made some great relationships with people through MAGFest and Materia itself. Thank you for MAGFest for having us, because you're all awesome. But speaking of such like a large amount of people, there's obviously a huge community to manage, and Doug Perry here is the person kind of responsible for that, keeping them in line. Maybe not so strict as that, but how do you feel things have changed from, say, you weren't necessarily strictly managing from the very beginning, that aspect, but you're obviously, I always viewed you as being quite a visible figure within the collective. You obviously came from OC Remix background and were quite well known in the VGM community. How do you feel it's changed from managing from the community from the beginning and the Wild West kind of period of it versus now?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the big things that changed is that when everything first started, the network, the pool of participants in the collective were essentially people that came from Sebastian's Facebook post that said, hey, who wants to do Final Fantasy VII album? Which meant that there was already like a community kind of there. It wasn't necessarily that everybody knew each other, but everybody knew Sebastian by that point. So there was like that sort of common thread. Now, with, you know, as we have triple, quintupled, sextupled, is that how you say it? I know it's like sextupled or like quintupled or whatever, our total. You know, people are coming from all sorts of different backgrounds. And so I think as a community manager, one thing that's really important is to help, and this is, I should add, this is something I'm constantly learning about. Is one thing that that's really important is learning how to help communicate and mitigate expectations about what a community like this is. You know, why are we here? What do we do? What can you expect from being here? What sorts of things should you contribute? Then from there, you know, just what the rules are. We have a few rules in place. I'm thankful that, for the most part, in our group, I don't have to worry too much about having to be the bad guy, which is great because I'm not a very good bad guy. But, you know, every once in a while I have to go through and, you know, pull someone aside and say, hey, thanks for posting. Unfortunately, that broke one of our rules, so I'm going to remove it, but you can do this, that, or the other thing, which can be expected in any community. But I have to say, for a community that has grown as much as ours has over the last 3 years, I don't have to do that too often, and that's really nice.
Cool. Moving on to another bit of our talk, Lauren. If I wanted to sell an album of remixes for my favorite game, what would I take into consideration when, as regards marketing and I suppose preparation for release?
Okay, so one of the most fundamental things about marketing that I think people who don't have a marketing background don't think about is the fact that you have an audience and you want that audience to buy something. And I think a lot of times people come at a project like this, like, what do I want to make? And that's fantastic for creating something that's like the project of your heart. But if your idea is to reach an audience, and especially if you're doing something like Materia licensed albums, an album that you want people to actually put their hard-earned dollars into, you have to think about, well, who wants what I'm making? And like who are they, and do they want this? And so you have to ask yourself, like, who is the audience? How big is the audience? Like, is this going to be feasible? So I would definitely say, like, think about it. Like, are you making a small niche project for like I mean, are you going to do Color a Dinosaur where the only people that are excited about Color a Dinosaur are the people who love Tim Fallon, and that's like within our community, within like the people who are really into video game music, people know Tim Fallon, but if you talk about the people who like play casually, they probably don't know Color a Dinosaur on the NES. So that might be what we call a niche project. On the other hand, if you're like, hey, what if I made one of the mainstream Final Fantasies? You can probably count on a pretty large audience unless you decide that you're only going to do people doing kazoo covers, in which case, like, depending on who you are and whether you're known on YouTube for being a kazoo expert, you may or may not be able to get away with like a giant audience there. Do we have a kazoo in the audience? Is that what I just heard?
There's always a kazoo in the audience.
Kazoo covers of Mystic Quest.
Like a
Oh my!
disease.
I would buy that. But it's so you really have to ask yourself, like, am I making something that people are going to want to purchase? And as much as it hurts, and I know it hurts as an artist to have to think about the thing that you're making as a product to sell. Like, it sounds like I'm taking your soul away and turning you into a cog in the machine. And that's not the intent. But I mean, you do have to be practical if you want to do your crazy like kazoo Color a Dinosaur covers. And you really want to do that. Like, by all means do that, but also understand that your audience is going to be small and the money that you're going to make is going to be small, so the money you can put into it is small. But if your goal is to reach as big an audience as possible, you really have to consider that. So when we look at proposals for albums, one of the things that we consider is how big is this audience? Are we going to be able to reach them? Are they an audience that is receptive to fan covers? Because there are games that are really popular, but if you start going to the community and you're like, hey, I covered the soundtrack, and they're not used to thinking about that sort of thing, they'll be like, okay. Which is not really the audience you want. But if you, like, for example, we made an Undertale album, and not only is Undertale really popular, but also its fans are always creating fan material. So when you put out more covers, they know what it is, they get excited about it. Instead of having to kind of convince them, like, explain your thing and then sell your thing, that's way harder than just selling the thing to people who get it. So I would say the number one thing is to figure out who your audience is and whether you want to consider the audience. And if you don't want to consider the audience, then there are ways to do like fun covers on the side, make your own free album, that sort of thing. By all means, I don't want to discourage anyone from making the project of your heart. So really, really ask yourself, like, what are my goals? Who am I reaching? And how am I going to reach them?
Cool. That's a great answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Diwa, you've released a number of albums over the years, both outside of Materia Collective and also through the Materia Collective.
Yes.
How do you feel the experience of releasing through Materia Collective has been?
Yes, most of the time it's gonna, whenever I want to propose an album launch, my own solo project to be released through Materia, I usually come up with a very solid plan first. I make sure that I already have the masters, everything's mixed and ready to go. I have the artwork, I have the main concept. Maybe I'll give the most recent example of, I just released so far close to 10 albums called, a series of albums called Video Game Music Box through Materia Collective. And it's basically video game music arranged to sound like a single music box. And it's all on Spotify right now, and
Plug.
yeah. But also exclusively released through Materia Collective. It was all just an idea in my head, and I asked Sebastian, hey Sebastian, would you want to release a video game music box series of covers? And he was like, okay, yes, let's do it. And okay, I'll come back to you after 2 to 3 months. And I did. Everything's ready. All 6 albums ready to go. All the masters, all the cover albums, everything ready to go. So I think what I'm trying to say is I try to make the process easier for Sebastian to say yes right away. So I don't give any hassle. I try to make sure everything's ready to go in a snap. And I think it's been a very fruitful process for both of us, for myself and Materia, because I try to make it as easy as possible for Sebastian to not say no.
Excellent. That's great. Eman, or Emmanuel, which do you prefer?
Emmanuel, you want?
Eman. You deal with metadata. What information do album producers need to provide for a solo album release? And how much of a difference is there between supplying information for a solo release and a large community release?
Cool. Okay, that's definitely a fun question because solo albums tend to only have maybe 1 or 2 contributors to it. That 1 or 2 contributors does everything. So one of the things that people don't seem to realize is, a mixer gets credit, a masterer gets credit, the producer gets credit, the arranger gets credit, the original composer gets credit. All that kind of stuff has to be taken into factor. So it's like if somebody's releasing a Final Fantasy X album, they're not just going to say, oh yeah, Emmanuel Lagumbai did this album. They're going to say Emmanuel Lagumbai composed or arranged the music for this that Nobuo Uematsu composed and produced the album that he also mixed and mastered if he's the only person doing that. That's like all that kind of stuff that you can get credit for. Because you should take credit for that. Because if you're doing all that work, why not, show that you are actually doing it? Additionally, you'll have featured artists on some albums where, like, maybe you're collaborating with a friend. Let's say my Final Fantasy album, I'm working a lot with Steven, who's playing guitar on it. So I'm going to put a track name, but it's going to feature Steven on a lot of them. So that's also a credit that goes into it. And then you also think about, like, the royalty splits that go internally after the cut is taken and the royalties are going to the original composer and whatever other finances have to take place. And you also have to think about, like, just constantly being aware of what you can credit yourself for and what storefronts will credit what, because they're not all the same. Sometimes, like, one place will only take 5 or 7 featured artists per track, whereas there's like 30 people that worked on a track, so you can't really put all of that into a single track. It depends on the storefront. It's totally different. But those are the main things I would focus on. And I guess the difference between community and solo is just the sheer number and the volume of
sheer
different
volume of data that you have to
and it
work
also
your way
depends
through.
on the type of album, because sometimes it's a collaborative album that's not just a single game. So you're looking for original producers or original publishers for each game that's featured on that soundtrack. And that takes time to find out who's actually getting the credit for that and who's actually getting paid for that, because it's easy if everybody's coming from Final Fantasy X and everybody's published by Square Enix, but if it's an album that's like Skyrim, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy IX, Super Smash Brothers, there's a handful of albums that do that, and that gets a little bit like murky because you want to make sure the data is correct for that and everybody's credited and paid correctly.
Yep. Cool. Circling back to Sebastian, got a couple of questions left, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. There might be a little bit of overlap between what Lauren talked about, but Sebastian, what are you looking for in the artists that you work with? If they email you about releasing an album, what is the first thing you want to know?
That's a fantastic question, and the answer to that has actually changed over the years, sort of by having had a lot more experience and seeing sort of where the artists that we take on as individual artists, like Diva, artists that come to us and say, hey, I have a goal, I have a vision, I have a plan, and I need blank. I mean, now that Materia is a real company, I have employees and contractors on payroll, and it's been an interesting transition to sort of go through. Like, well, worst case, I just invest a little bit of time, and an album might not necessarily do so well, but at least it's out there. And now that there's sort of this financial responsibility that's attached to it, all of a sudden, the time and the investment becomes more significant. So it's, I think right now, one of the answers is commercial viability, and Lauren already talked a lot about that. Who's the recipient of the creation that you are working on? What is the purpose, the intent, and sort of the path for the album that you're creating? And that's a really challenging question. In many cases, when we're creating cover, remix, fan albums, the intent is for our audiences, or in many cases, it's just sort of ourselves. I would love to work on a Quest 64 album because that's the album I grew up with, and the 14 other people in the world who've played it might appreciate it. Thank you. Is it going to be? No, it's an incredible game. It holds a really dear spot in my heart. But is it going to be financially successful? maybe not. It might make $50 in the next 10 years. And if it's
51.
that's like 10 coffees, but sort of the intent of an album like that. I live in Seattle, but the intent of the album then becomes, I'm creating this for myself, and it's sort of unattached from the commercial viability, from the finances, from the amount of time that goes into all the different processes that go along with an album. Diva approached me and said, "Hey, I have these." What did we do? Six albums in the beginning, and said, "Hey, these are music box covers. These could do really well." And I looked at them and I reviewed the pitch and said, "Okay, I think this is something that we can invest time into and help." In terms of what Materia's role is as a label. I think we provide creative ideation. We provide a second set of ears and eyes. Distribution in the digital and physical worlds are mostly solved. And I think for the albums that we work on and provide, it's more like having a partner, a friend who wants to be there with you and help you succeed. That was a bit of a ramble answer, but I think it gets there.
So, one last question for all of you. What do you feel is the most important part of Materia Collective to you, and what do you value in the Materia Collective? If you want to start,
I'll begin. For me, it would be the community itself, because we all have one goal. We love video game music. And we all have different sets of skills that, fortunately, it complements really well, and that is very valuable for me.
I guess I probably have to say the same, honestly, which would make sense given my role and everything. But for me, I was fortunate enough to get involved in the community, right? At a really fortuitous moment in my life. I had just gotten out of school, and I was trying to figure out what I was doing with my life, and I had a lot of free time. Great balance of lots of time and not a lot of money. And when we started working on our Final Fantasy VII album, I had a lot of time to start to collaborate with people. I think I recorded for 30-something tracks, working with people I had literally never met before. I remember I'd never met Steven before, and I recorded on your sort of J-rock, crazy thing, and
You sang on mine.
I sang on your track. Yeah, I don't think I worked with you on anything in that one, but I played with you last year. I've collaborated with you a bunch,
a couple of times, yeah.
And that was really neat because Materia is a really interesting mix of professional and amateur musicians, and you're not really sure who you're going to meet and to what extent they will impact your own creation. But for me to be able to work with other professional musicians doing things that are way different from anything that I'm doing, but then to also work with amateur musicians who are super hard workers and super talented and really have a lot on the horizon for them is really exciting and really energizing. So I think for me, it's the passion is certainly a part of it, but it's also just looking at the horizon, the possibilities that you see in a community of people in terms of what kinds of collaborations can be born out of that is really exciting to me.
That's a fantastic answer. It's hard to jump on that as well and say yes, of course it's the community, but I think. For me specifically, I think one of the most important things that Materia sort of does through sort of our joint collaborations, we can help provide opportunities, and not necessarily as an abstract concept of yes, here's one opportunity, but rather helping fulfill goals in sort of a safe environment. You want to try out something off the wall and just experiment with something, find new collaborators, have a chicken choir that sings. Just try something out and then find sort of your team of fellow musicians, professionals, friends, a community that you want to continue working with. And as you're both growing, or as you and all of the other collaborators that you work with, as you both grow, you both elevate your own standards, you get to experience new things, you get to have experiences that otherwise may not have been possible. So I think in terms of the reach that Materia can help provide is like beyond what any individual can have on their own. That was very abstract. I'm just very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my TED.
You thrive on abstract. You are the master of
Thank you,
abstract.
because without you, none of us would be here.
MAGFest would be.
I know, but Materia wouldn't.
Oh, yes.
All right, so I guess that's my turn to answer. So unless these two are going to be contrarians, my guess is that we're all going to answer the community in one form or another, just because that's so much of what Materia is. But I think the difference is kind of what that community has meant to us. So I am not a professional musician, unlike, for example, these two fellows right over here. I didn't go to composer school. I didn't go to music school. And I never really considered myself somebody who could do like these more complicated arrangements and things like that. So I guess for me, Materia has been a source of a lot of personal growth and tackling things that I never thought I could possibly do. I've grown as a musician, and I feel like I've grown as a person. Being able to work with marketing, I've kind of grown as a professional too. And it's just really cool because there's such a high level of enthusiasm. There's always someone to answer a question. Like I didn't go to composer school, but I have friends who went to composer school, and I can kind of secondhand be like, hey, can anybody help me? I'm stuck on this. And somebody will come out and help you. You can say, last minute, I have this track, it's almost done, I don't know what to do with it. And next thing you know, like a day before it's due, somebody scrambles to make the thing happen, and you learn, you have those opportunities. And so for me, it's been like this really, really, really crazy, cool, exciting ride of like, I never thought that I would be in the position that I am doing the things that I'm doing. And I don't know, it's incredibly inspiring.
So my favorite thing is probably just metadata.
Live and die by the numbers.
I just like looking at spreadsheets. That's just my thing. No, that said, there's a lot of the metadata within the metadata, as in the community. See how I
Metaphor.
no, that's been fantastic. Like I've looked at it. While everybody is a person there, they are also a fantastic resource. With the way technology is nowadays, we can just remotely record things that we need to get done. And I could just post on Materia Collective, our Facebook group, and be like, hey, I need a balalaikai player to play on this album like tonight. And like 4 people would be like, all right, so when do I start? That's just kind of the fun of it. And they can just send me a track, and it's professionally, mixed, mastered on their end, and they'll just record it. I'll pay them however. I've had some folks that I've gotten to work with for some other personal tracks that I met through Materia Collective. A few of them are in the audience. Damien played on a track for me in a game. Tia sang for me in a game. And it's been fantastic having that kind of community where you can be like, hey guys, I'm working on something, and I need that to happen like within this next week or two. And most of them are like, all right, yeah, I can make that happen. I'll just record really quick. So it's not only just a great community, but it's a fantastic resource of musicians as well.
I'll speak for myself only. I know that I constantly struggle with choosing music as a career with all of the expectations of like your family who doesn't get it and stuff like that. So I don't know if anybody else has that, but I certainly do. And so Materia Collective is great because I get to be around a bunch of people who are unironically taking it seriously. And that helps me with self-awareness, and it helps me as an artist to because sometimes you forget, like, like, let's say you pursue it, and you're doing all this stuff, or you went to school for it, and like, you take it seriously, but you still have, like, you feel like you're taking crazy pills because your family's like, well, what about that normal job? And you're like, God damn, I'm pursuing this, and you get in Materia Collective, and everybody's like, yeah, we're pursuing this, so just back off, and it's like, great. And so, for me, it has been really nice to find a community of people, and there's the community answer, yes, I'm sticking with everybody, but to find a community of people where we're kind of like smiling and in tears together, and you butt heads a little bit, and that helps you to grow and become a better person and be a little more patient, and you take what you think is this great idea, my Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine remix album, and people are like, nah, and you're like, but that was a great game, that friction of having to bounce ideas and give and take and collaborate and work with people makes you better, it makes you more polished, in your career, and you build some, I would say, lifelong friends. Like, these are people that, since I've joined Materia Collective, I am staying in contact with them, and I don't have anybody else in my adult life other than my wife and my kids that I enjoy and want to be around, like Materia Collective. You guys are like my community of friends that I will go and fly from Germany to come and see. So, yeah.
For me, a feeling of belonging and a nurturing space for learning new things as part of the community. I'm completely self-taught. I started off in bands. I have no musical theory background, and through Materia Collective, I've been able to, write sheet music and get people to sing on my tracks. And I was terrified of that before I started.
Didn't you meet your voice teacher through?
I've met my voice teacher through Materia Collective, who's been helping me with music theory. A wonderful lady, Elizabeth Sharoff, based in LA. And it's also especially important to me, as I live in the UK, there's not a lot of Materia members around me. I do still feel like I'm belonging to something, even though I'm hundreds of miles away from these people. They're all wonderful, and I wouldn't exchange them for anything. And on that soppy note, would like to open it up to questions from the audience, because I feel like we've rambled on long enough. Well,
We do.
we have these wireless mics. Does anybody know how to use them? I think you need to hold the red button on the side to turn them on.
Yeah, we can.
How many audio professionals?
Phone. I have a microphone. Yep. Okay.
Maybe if you guys want to line up in the middle, actually, might be easier to kind of just take questions that way, so that I'm not neglecting anybody.
All right. What's up? Thank you for letting me steal your show for like 5 minutes. I've been here for like 4 years. I've known you guys since Materia started. I've seen you play on stage in the concert hall before. Love your accent, but I feel a connection with you. What's your name? Diwa. All right. So I need to ask you personally, in front of the man, how do you feel working with Materia Collective? Because I'm guessing you already know like a little bit about what your rights are as a musician and how to make it on your own. There's a lot of freedom as an individual in today's community to take knowledge of your own rights and do your own thing.
Yes.
So what advantage do you feel there is to teaming up with somebody like Sebastian?
Yeah, before I even started working with Materia Collective, I've already been a professional musician for 20 years. So when it comes to knowing my rights, I know it full well. And Sebastian is very well versed in copyright law, licensing law, and the VGM community actually looks up to Sebastian's knowledge. Whenever someone on Facebook asks a licensing question or a copyright question, everyone will be like, ask Sebastian, ask Sebastian.
Not a
So
lawyer.
when it comes to that, I am very solid.
Thank you.
Another question?
Can I
Thank
say
you.
a quick comment on that real quick? So one thing that's cool, right, in the last 10 years, there's been the big explosion of the independent musician being able to make it, and we've got more tools than ever to be able to succeed and all that stuff, which is totally cool. But the one thing that we're still developing in this new frontier is the things that all of the big evil record companies used to do, which was marketing, artist development, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's where Materia Collective is really filling the void. It's becoming a small, safe, community-friendly entity that can fill that role, because sometimes independent musicians on their own might not have all the research. They make great music, but beyond that, it's kind of a knowledge gap. And so that's where this fills it in. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
I just want to state for the record that spreadsheets are the best, and that I love them dearly. Just throwing that out there real quick, getting that out of the way. You guys, actually, a group of you talked about metadata and about kind of artist, telling the artist that like, this might not sell super well if you do this thing or not. So what I'm curious about is, from the statistics that you guys have seen, are compilation albums where it's, you said like this is Skyrim and Smash Bros and all these, this is one song from each franchise or game, do those fare any better, worse, differently than somebody who said, I'm just going to make a Final Fantasy album, or I'm just going to make an album based on this one game?
That's a fantastic question, and I wish I had slightly more data to really back this up. but from like just a general overview, specific cover albums for a specific game or franchise do much better, commercially speaking, than a compilation album that combines sort of a wider range of maybe not interconnected games. So that applies to both the community albums, that applies to some of the individual artist albums that we work with. So for example, if you're putting together an Elder Scrolls album, you know, it is going to find the Elder Scrolls fan community, you know, Skyrim, Oblivion, everything else. Bad nerd, I haven't played the earlier ones, I'm sorry. But it's going to find sort of its niche, and those fans will appreciate it, as opposed to like a larger, broader album where the marketing or the potential marketing impact is a little bit lower.
Yeah, when I am presented with an album to try to figure out how to promote, and it's from a lot of different games, like it's kind of like, where do I start? Where it's like, oh, okay, we recently released a Xenogears cover album, and I'm like, okay, Xenogears is kind of old, but you know, there are people who are obsessed with Mitsuda, and there are people who are obsessed with the more recent Xeno games, and so even though the game itself might be a little old by now, there are these markets that we can guarantee. But if it's like, you know, every single, you know, PS1 RPG, suddenly, like, where do I go? Okay, well, at least I've got a genre there, and I can focus on that. But like, the more you can focus your audience, the better. If you're kind of doing scattershot, like we've had some albums with it, which were like, okay, we've got a few tracks for Nintendo, so let's kind of promote those to the Nintendo fans, and there's a few like RPG tracks, we'll promote those to the RPG fans, but you're kind of dividing and conquering is not necessarily a good idea. So it is definitely a harder sell.
Is that where you start looking at people and saying, maybe you should narrow that field a little bit more and maybe make it just about one of those two things?
Yeah, I would say narrow it down if you can, and also be really intentional about which games you choose. Like if you have, I mean, obviously we all love our deep cuts, and if you're going to do a compilation album, you might as well have a couple of deep cuts on there. But go for like, you know, Undertale, Final Fantasy, Skyrim, things that people love and are looking for, because those are the tracks that are going to take off. And if you're challenging yourself with a compilation album, you might as well give yourself as many advantages as you can.
Yeah, that's fair.
So sell out a little bit.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the question.
Hi. This isn't so much a question as a very brief statement. Sebastian, you smile a lot more when people mention metadata than when they mention community. I'm just throwing that out there. I think your answer was a lie. And you can rebuttal this if you'd like, but I know in your heart of hearts that what I just said was right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mason.
No comment.
Tournament Art. Award-winning group. Metadata.
Question about like working with actual composers of the game music that's in the albums. Are there past examples of where you've worked with game soundtracks composer? Like maybe they wanted to release like a piano cover album of their own work, or like I don't know if there's like any examples of that.
I think Undertale is probably a good example for that. We started working with Toby Fox. We're helping him with music rights management, distribution, publishing, metadata, and it's obligatory at this point. But Doug was one of the folks who proposed, hey, you know, this is a fantastic community. The music is fantastic. What if we sort of do our own tribute album for, you know, music that's already part of Materia Collective? I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that.
Well, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it was, you know, I just played this game 3 or 4 times, and I really loved it, and I wanted to see us do an album. And, you know, I think my wanting to do that happened around the same time, actually, that Toby started working with Materia. But, you know, I guess it just comes down to intent, really. Like, when Materia Collective works with a composer to help distribute their album, and they become a part of our library, you know, our primary focus there is to help distribute, right? We're there to help put their album on storefronts, so that you can get it through iTunes, Spotify, whatever your means of what's the word I'm looking for?
Consumption.
Yeah, consumption. There we go. We were not digesting it, but as for a community album, that's a different thing. When I made my album was called Fallen. It was an Undertale tribute. It was like 97 tracks. There were like hundreds of people who were involved. I'm sure many of them are in this room right now. That was really meant to be a tribute, which is honestly the spirit of most of our community albums, you know? So you know, going back to Xenogears, I think I would probably be beside myself if Yasunori Mitsuda just popped out of the ether and said, "Hey, I'm going to distribute all of my original music through you guys from now on." I think I would probably just bury myself somewhere because I wouldn't have anything left to live for anymore. But that wouldn't necessarily dissuade me from wanting to still create a tribute album because, you know, the arrangements that the fans create are transformative and reflective of a different perspective of that music that the original composer didn't necessarily have. So I think there's value in both.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for taking the time out to break down. This is sort of my first MAGFest, so I'm getting a lot of new and good information. So, cheers, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do we ever get to look forward to a Materia Collective concert? Like, are you guys looking at live performance?
We did that last year.
Yeah, so last year we had a community showcase, and usually the community showcases are like, pick 4 bands for your 4-hour thing. But Doug and I were like, that's not demonstrative of like how Materia works. So let's do it talent show style with like 70 million people involved trading out every track.
It wasn't a good idea.
But it was great, and I would totally do it again.
Fun.
Who needs sleep?
It was a good experiment, I'd say.
It was no. It wasn't a good idea, like for my own mental health. And I mean,
so it's up to MAGFest because they change out who does the community showcases. I guess I can't speak for both of us, but I think that we'd all kind of love to have that opportunity again because in order to really get at the Materia Collective experience, I feel like just putting on like, oh well, this band is in Materia sort of, and this band is Materia, it doesn't really quite get at the heart and soul of it. So to really, I think, do the community aspect justice, like doing the talent show style, get everyone involved. Pick from different albums is the way to go, and that is a pretty big undertaking. So we'll see if we get a chance to do it again. We'd love to.
Right on. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yo. We're coming up to 5 minutes left, so we should at least get these questions done.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for creating a platform for artists to feel confident in themselves in making money, because that is a very hard thing, I think, that, you know, artists, we have to deal with in North America. So thanks for that. I have 2 questions for Sebastian. Like, what is your most proud statistic? And 2, what does your 3 to 5 year plan look like? Like, when you're driving when you're driving in Seattle, what's something that pops in your head of like, that would be really cool if we did that? So statistic and that.
Oh, that's a good question. I'll start with the driving music, and right now there's a Spotify playlist called Holy Shit, and it's just a mishmash of everything. It's not just video game music. Sorry. No, I've actually really enjoyed listening to, like, for my own personal like music, because my job is listening to masters and reviewing them for clicks and pops, and it's sort of this weirdly draining experience where like you want to enjoy music, but you have to approach it from like a just exclusively like professional standpoint. Like, okay, I have to listen to every single track. So it's nice to have like things that are not associated with video games, just other genres. Everything else. For the first one, I compiled a bunch of statistics recently for like market segmentation of like where the money comes from, like how it's spread out for like specific soundtracks. It was really interesting to see for like Bandcamp is about 33% of the revenue that accounts for video game soundtracks. So if your music's not on Bandcamp, what are you doing? That said, if your music is exclusively on Bandcamp, you're ignoring, 2/3 of everything else. And I might be getting those numbers fuzzy. I'm planning on publishing like a broader, like more detailed report in like a month. But I think it's not so much like a specific data point that I'm proud of. It's nice to have more data insights and context that surrounds it, because I think the context is what helps us make more informed decisions as creators. And I think that's what I'm excited to share. Once I hire an army of data engineers and scientists who we have discovered the following, sir. And, to be able to provide that to the community at large to help make more informed decisions, especially of commercial viability and like the success of a product lifetime, is something that we want to take more seriously. Good question.
Thanks, bud.
Cool, we should just have time for these last 2 questions.
Speed
and
round.
That'll be it. We can talk to us out in the hallway afterwards, I'm sure. At least if some
Yeah,
of us are
come hang
around.
out with us. We're just gonna be hanging out for a while.
Volunteered everyone's services.
Okay, great. So first off, thanks for giving this panel and helping us get a little more informed about Materia and what they stand for. And really one of the biggest things I took is that community is important, and that's something that we all know. We're all here for MAGFest because we love video games, we love music. So when you think about your community and developing it, how much are you kind of focusing on long-term retention of having the community here participate and stay involved versus trying to get new members into your community and having that kind of outreach? And also, based off of those factors, like, how do you plan, do you have any goals for the community to make change in the landscape as a whole?
To start actually with your second question, we haven't figured this out quite yet, but I'm hoping to come up with at some point a more standardized and a more organized process for how we onboard new members. But we do. I think I've heard a number of other communities and groups and ensembles kind of have this perspective, and for me, from my perspective, I would definitely want to echo this. I would want people in the Materia Collective community to get to use and enjoy the community as long as it serves them, And it's totally possible. Somebody might get their start with us and then their career explodes and we don't see them so much anymore. And, that might happen, and that's okay because we got a chance to help them get to that. That being said, I think I was super lucky, and I think a lot of us were lucky to get to stumble into this the way we did, and I hope that more people get that opportunity as well. So yes, we definitely do want to see more new members come in. That being said, if we just say okay, the floodgates are open, then all chaos breaks loose and there's no organization anymore, and then we're in trouble. So that's why eventually down the line we're going to have a more organized and logical, I suppose, means of onboarding new members. But yeah, in the meantime, though, I think, Evan, we have we're going to be accepting new members here, correct?
Yeah, totally. So come talk to us. We'll add you to the group, and then we'll get that going.
Yeah, I will say that's something that gets discussed a lot in the leadership team is how do we make sure that new members feel welcome and are part of the community, and then actively bring them in as well. Not just hey, welcome, all right, cool. But when a new project starts, when we're producing an album, I will go out, make a post, and say, all right, who's in the group, who's new, and then try to pair people up as best as possible. Here's what's going down. So, not that we don't have room to improve, but we definitely take active discussions and steps to bring new people into the fold to make sure that we're
Stephen,
not
I think we're
doing
going
the
to have
clicker
to wrap
thing.
it up. We're getting the signal to wrap it up.
Yep.
Do you have a very quick question, or would you like to ask us out in the hallway? The gentleman.
It's quick. That really depends on you.
Let's do it.
That depends on
do
the
it.
people.
Yeah.
So I'll start off with two things. One, I'm just simply going to say, great job. And two, if you were looking to expand outside of the video game music spectrum, because we all love music in different forms and facets, I was just curious as to what direction it would be.
I'm always getting on Sebastian's case to tell him that we should probably stay focused so that our audience is focused, personally, but he gets to make that decision.
No comment.
Yo.
I've started describing Materia as a soundtrack label. Of course, 99.7 something percent of everything we've put out so far has been video game music or video game tangentially related, because that's where our heart is. That's I think where we can do the most good, because we understand the fandom, we understand the community. It's where all of our hearts lie. I don't know how quickly we're going to sort of expand a little bit broader. There's a lot of different types of soundtracks out there, but I think for now the biggest good we can do as a community is within the games.
I am immediately sorry for putting you in that position.
Then we can talk more.
Yo,
right.
and last but not least, right, this is just a thing to tell you that there's a company called A Wall. If you were looking for a way to start a process, I would start looking at how some of those companies that are starting to emerge are doing what they're doing, because I think it's very smart. That's it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Thanks
everybody.
all for coming, and thank you, MAGFest, for putting up with us.